Hi guys, this is Kalina from Eat, Read, Sleep, and today we are discussing the subtle art of not giving an F. Thank you for joining us today. If you like what you see at the end of the show, please make sure you tap that like button for us and give that little subscribe button a little hug.
So, Kalina, we have a really important book today.
Yes.
The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F was one of my first books that I got into when I wanted to do this whole self-help thing.
Okay.
So,
How did you stumble upon this?
So that's the funny story, right? Funny thing is, I was at a point in my life where I was taking a lot of things personally. I had a lot of mental issues I wanted to work out, and I felt like, you know what? I need to be numb to things. I don't want to care about things. I shouldn't let things affect me. So I picked up this book because it has that bright orange cover, and it's pretty much says exactly what I was hoping. I don't want to give an F about anything. I just want to be this person. So
I didn't want to care anymore.
Yeah, I didn't want to care. So I picked up the book, and oddly enough, it was one of the most influential books for me because it was not about don't give an F about everything. It's more about like, pick what you want to give an F about. Yeah. That's what I got out of it. I was just like, oh, okay, well, I guess I can be human, right? I shouldn't be this numb robot where I'm just like, I don't care.
I actually felt that same when I was reading this book. This title is very misleading.
It is.
Like, I actually think that the book can be called a couple of different things, like how to prioritize your Fs to give, or there's just... This title is very misleading.
The author himself, Mark Manson, he does a really good job of going through the book. And I think what I love about it is that he's very real.
Yeah.
The way I see the book is it's like an honest friend that you have that you don't like to listen to, but you know the advice he gives you, he or she will give you.
I get what you mean.
Is like, okay, I needed to hear this,
yes.
right?
So that's very blunt. And
he's very blunt, right? He's like, you're not special, don't try. So that's what I love about it, because he has a voice where it's like, okay, I'm going to just be honest with you. Mm-hmm. You can hate me all you want, but this is the truth. So I love that.
So you guys, if you recall from our previous segments, I actually listened to audio on 1.8, 1.9. So I read the first half of this book, and then towards the second half, I was actually listening to it. And the way that this book is written and read, if you're listening at 1.8, he's like screaming and yelling at you the entire time. I was like, I'm so sorry. Yes. I will be better. I won't give any more Fs. So it's pretty funny to listen to on a faster.
All right, so let's get into the book. It is a counterintuitive approach, right? It's not your typical self-help book like, you should feel empowered. It's not that frou-frou like, oh, let's do this kind of stuff. It's more like, guys, this is a reality. This is what we need to do. Here's how you prioritize things. And then again, the overarching theme is don't give an F about everything, but you should know what you need to give an F about. Specifically find out what those are. Yeah,
I like that because he comes off the bat and he says, I'm not trying to get you to be a better person. Yep. You're not trying to learn new things or new tactics to be happy. Because when you do that, a lot of the self-help books that he points out actually focuses on things that you're lacking and you're trying to improve on. And the problem with that is that you're always going to be fixated on what you are lacking. And so it's almost like this negative paradox where you're trying to be better, but at the same time, you're kind of sad about what you don't have. So whereas this book is like, just be comfortable, just accept who you are. And that's why I especially love the first example. Mm-hmm. The first person that we meet in this book is this drunken poet named Bukowski. Yes, Bukowski seems like a fun guy to hang out with, right? He's this poet. He writes poetry and no one likes him because he's a drunkard. He gambles, he drinks all the time. And then it's not until he's 50 years old that he gets his big hit. His publisher finds an interest in him, and then they give him an offer, and he ends up writing poems and books that he sells 2 million copies. He becomes this famous author, but he never changes himself. He's a loser still. He shows up to his readings drunk. He doesn't care about anything. He doesn't care about his image. So he stayed true to him the whole time. And what was really cool about this is that, you read through this and you think the moral of the story is like, hey, like, if I just keep trying, I will get my big break, or just stick with it and persevere. But that's not the message of the story at all. When Bukowski died, his tomb said, don't try. Right. And I thought that was really cool. And it's important to me because I'm working on this be authentic journey where you try not to care so much about what other people think, not seeking approval. And this just made me, it kind of solidified, the path that I'm going on. Is like, it's just be who you are. And if you get appreciated for who you are, that's better than being appreciated for who you really aren't.
I think that the biggest part you mentioned is being authentic, right? So he was himself. He tried for so many years to get his stuff published, never worked, but he just stayed his course. He's like, this is who I am. I'm not going to change for anybody else, and just stayed the course. And I think that was important because that's why Mark Manson has a chapter, don't try.
Yeah.
Just be yourself.
Yeah.
So I love
being
that.
himself allowed him to create his most authentic work,
Yes.
right? And that's what was so genius and power about his art, was that people felt the authenticity of it. It also reminds me of the last book that we read, The Alchemist,
Yes.
right? It talks about the universe helping you, conspiring to help you get your dreams. But when you are trying to take control of things, then the universe can't do its job. So it's kind of like this, where he's like, I just don't care. It is what it is. And when his time came, the universe is like, here you go. Let me take care of you. And he was true this entire time.
Yep.
And he got his big break.
One of the things that he does mention is the backwards law.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the idea that the more you pursue a feeling better all the time, the less satisfied you become.
Yes, and that's why the self-help books don't always work, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I love that a lot too, because I think that's one thing that, again, anti-self-help book kind of thing is the backwards law, pretty much.
So let me ask you this, T.
Yes.
The premise is just don't give an F.
Yeah.
Or as much of an F, or refocus your F into something that really does matter. How do you do that? Because I feel like in our society, we all walk around with so many Fs to give. We give an F about everything that's not even important or meaningful to us.
You have to know what specifically you're going to stand your ground on.
Okay.
I think we are at an age where there's a lot of information, a lot of things happening. There's a lot of things coming in our faces through social media, news, all that kind of stuff. So we want to care, right? Yeah. You feel like you want to be connected to the world, so you want to care about what everyone else is caring about.
And even if you don't want to, though, it's being shoved in your face all the time.
Exactly. So I think at that point, you become giving an F about everything, so you become overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. But what Mark says is, again, you have to know specific things that you can say, this is what I stand for. This is what I want to do.
Your value. Right?
This is what I value
later,
a lot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And this is what I'm going to give an F about. I think that was really important because I know myself, I do tend to, kind of jump from headline to headline. Oh my God, the war. Oh my God, this. Oh my God, that. And I'm like, I want to fight for that.
You have to care about everything.
I want to care about this. I want to post about this. But it's not. I really should self-reflect, because at that point I am overwhelming myself.
Yeah.
So then I start caring too much, and I feel insufficient when I don't provide the same kind of value.
Yeah, I almost feel drained. You're caring about so much, and then at the end of the day, you just don't have enough to care about yourself or what's really important.
The next chapter he goes into is happiness is a problem.
What?
So in this chapter, he does kind of go through the history of the Buddha. Mm-hmm. Right. Growing up in a very wealthy family, the king had always kind of suppressed Buddha. He didn't want him to know the dangers of the outside world.
He didn't want him to be sad.
He didn't want him to be sad. He didn't want to be overwhelmed with all the other drama and all that kind of stuff happening. So the Buddha says, I need to explore the outside world. I need to know what's going on in my kingdom. So he ends up escaping and living in the streets that he oversees. And then he became just as sad. He's seeing the suffering, the poverty, all that kind of stuff. And it was really cool to see, because at that point he understood the king's perspective to why the king was saying this way.
Yeah.
So I love that the story of the Buddha was really important, because there's no way of happiness both ways. You can't be sheltered or you can't be too involved.
You can't have one without the other, right?
Exactly.
You have to have the bad with the good, because otherwise you wouldn't know what happiness is if you don't have anything to compare it to.
Yep, exactly. And another thing I love that he does go over is, and I've seen myself do this a lot, which is, if I get this, I will be happy. Materialism, pretty much.
Oh,
right?
yes, he does say that. So, in society, it's always, well, if I look like this person, then I'll feel better. Or if I buy job or this promotion, then I'll feel better. Yeah.
Exactly. Like if I get a promotion, or if I get a BMW, or if I get this nice suit, if I get nice shoes, this is going to be my source of happiness.
Yeah.
And that never lasts. Yeah. After that, you want more. You want something else. So striving for that as well all the time can also cause you to.
He calls to the fact that our society is so materialistic now that that's all we go after. And we feel like that's the only way that we can be happy, because the materialistic desires and needs now has overshadowed our internal intrinsic desires and need.
Yeah.
So we don't realize and connect that, hey, I need this pair of shoes because it's fancy and, people are going to like it. We don't see it as an internal, it's not just about the shoes. It's your desire to seek approval and trying to solve for that versus just adding the layered on materialistic, superficial things that we think will help us feel better.
Yeah, and you think of the value of that, right? Seeking approval of others to make yourself happy. If you actually put in that terms, you're like, I don't really care what other people think about me. So when you actually put in that context, you're like, why do I even do this? Why do I actually put myself through that?
Yeah.
Another thing that he does go over is the second part of that statement. Happiness is a problem. Is having problems. As you know, I'm in a weight loss journey. And so one of the problems would be, okay, I need to join a gym. Great. I'm solving for that problem. So if I join the gym, I'm going to be super happy because I joined the gym. I'm going to lose all this weight.
But then
the problem comes in. I got to wake up early. I got to make sure I'm putting the time in the gym constantly. Make sure I'm prioritizing my family, my work, all that stuff. So I've solved one problem, but I've created 3 more.
Yes.
Right. So the more problems you're just continuously adding can lead to unhappiness.
Yeah, I really like that part because for me, it was kind of like that ding, ding, ding. Like, it's not about not having problems. It's realizing there are always going to be problems and picking your battles, right? And being accepting of the problems, because what happens sometimes is when we have a problem, at least for me, sometimes I get frustrated. And then that frustration doesn't allow me to find the solution because I get into this like victim mentality or this blame mentality where I'm like, this sucks and why do you have to deal with this problem? But if we're just like, hey, problems happen and they come, you expect it, you're prepared for it, and then you just move on, or you just don't give an F, right? And then you move on to a different type of problem. So that whole chapter is about happiness is not the problem, it's solving a problem is what makes you happy, because when you solve a problem, you feel the sense of growth. You feel like you're actually doing something, and that's what gives you that happiness.
So the next chapter 3, is You Are Not Special. It's a little harsh. Kind of hurt my ego a little bit there when you said that.
I actually have seen, what was it? I was watching a show or something, or reading another book, and it was a method of, it was in a TV show, and it's this wife and I forgot what TV show is husband and wife, and she's delivering a baby and he's screaming at her, "You're not special. Get the baby out. You're not special. Like everyone has a baby." And it made her like motivated to have the baby. And I was, this is Working Moms on Netflix. And I was like, that is so weird. Like, that's a weird type of motivation. And then when I read this, I was like, I kind of get it now.
In the book,
but yes, it does sound harsh.
It is. It's very harsh. In the book, he does talk about his disappointment panda, the superhero, or kind of the anti-superhero, pretty much. So who is the disappointment panda? I think
it's so cute that he makes up this disappointment panda, and he paints this picture of like how he's dressed with a tight t-shirt, and he's like this little like kung fu panda walking around, going door to door, telling people all the ways that they suck. Yeah. And all the realities about you, things that you never want to hear or admit. That kind of made me feel a little uncomfortable. And so I was like, I can't imagine what it would feel like if Disappointment Panda came to my door and just started rattling all this stuff off. I'd probably just sit there and cry.
Yeah, that's true.
But he says we all need it.
Yeah.
And I think in appropriate doses and appropriate manners, that's definitely something that would be value added for a lot of us.
Being special is something that, we've kind of passed on to our kids, and
oh, yes.
And as millennials, we got the same thing from our parents as well. So why is it not okay to be special?
Speak for yourself. I would like to just kidding. I was gonna say distance myself from the millennial age group, but it's not true. It's definitely the age of participation trophy, a little bit of coddling, making sure they feel good about themselves, giving them kudos for going to the bathroom, things that are like basic.
Here's a Barbie for actually cleaning your butt one time.
Yes, exactly, right? So we're in that type of phase, and I think when that came up for a reason, right? From the previous generation, it was very like, a little tough love. Yeah. And then that's why there was like, okay, hold the brakes. We gotta make sure we support our children, that they don't feel like beaten emotionally all the time. But now we've taken it to the extreme spectrum where our children, the slightest little thing, like it sets them off. So how do we find that fine balance and show the kids that like, hey, self-worth, self-esteem, all of that is important, but only if you have something that is worthwhile.
Yeah.
Like it can't be everything that you're good at, because if everyone's extraordinary, no one's extraordinary.
Exactly. Yeah. And he also brings up the point around entitlement, in this chapter, right?
Oh,
So
yes.
there's a lot of entitlement that happens, and there's two kinds of entitlement, which I always thought there's only one kind of entitlement, which is the people that think they're the best. But he actually argues there's two kinds. There's one that says, I'm the best, you guys all suck, so give me special treatment. And the other
My
one
son.
is, right? And then the other one is, I'm not the best, I suck, and you guys are all better than me, so give me special treatment because I'm the underdog kind of
I
thing.
can see that. That's like a passive aggressive
Yeah.
loser kind of.
And I won't deny I did identify the second entitlement,
Loser.
right?
Tapas.
Like, oh, I'm not adequate. I don't think I'm good enough. So
But did you feel like you were being entitled?
you don't feel it because again, I have the traditional mindset
Yeah.
that I am the best, so I feel entitled. Give me special permissions. I never when he argues it in the book, and I thought about, I'm like, that's also entitlement too, because I'm expecting different treatment.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I lack something.
So is there a way to not be entitled? Sounds like it's a either or situation there.
Like it says, you're not special. Everyone goes through struggles. Everyone has hardships. Everyone has things they need to improve on. Work on those things, right? Solve those problems.
I like how he mentions in the book that when you have a problem, everyone has the problem.
Exactly.
The same problem. Your problem is not unique to anyone else.
Right.
You're not the only you don't have the only problems in the world.
Yeah, and I think that arises because now we're at an age where you can see these beautiful lives of other people in our lives. You know, you're on Instagram, you're seeing all these, I'm hiking that, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And then you're like, here I am just sitting here.
Yeah.
What was it? Clipping my cat's nails and eating chips, right? Like
His examples are so funny.
So it's just so random, his examples.
Also burritos, that part made me crack up so much. I don't know why.
Yeah, the burritos thing. But he kind of talked about like that's what people have that sense. They're like, oh well, my life sucks, and I'm not I should be given special treatment.
What about people who don't? I mean, yes, social media is everywhere, but what about the people who don't rely on social media or don't use it? Because I feel like I know some of those people too who like, oh, I don't do social, and so they see a different type of world.
Yeah, but they're also so connected, though, right? There's still other people they know. They also watch the news, and they also see others. So in a way, we are all connected. Like my parents don't know how to use Facebook properly. They're on it, and they'll send me a million memes that don't mean anything to me, or like random forwards, right? I'm like, what is this? But they're so connected in some way.
True.
Chapter 4
Which one's
is around the value of suffering.
Oh, he has so many good examples for this. So
Yes.
what is the value of suffering first? How did you take that?
You have to identify something in your life that you say, this is worth it for me to suffer through, right? So for me, it's learning how to do video editing, right? So I know it's going to take a lot of hours out of my day. It's going to take a lot of time. I'm going to have a lot of ups and downs, but I'm willing to suffer through those because I know it's going to make what we're doing, this side job, a lot better. So I think this is really like important for me. So I'm willing to give that up to suffer. I'm suffering through it because I'm still learning, but there's value added to it.
I like this because it goes back to that almost anti-self-help book because most the other way around would be like, what are you willing to fight for? What are you going to do to get to where you need to? Whereas this is like, okay, along the way though, things are going to suck. And are you willing to struggle? Are you willing to face setbacks? And what are you willing to struggle for?
So one of the examples in the book that he gives is around I think is it a commander? It's Onada. He's from the Japanese army.
That's right.
And this is during World War II, and they're displaced in the Philippines. So the war is raging on. U.S. is in the Philippines trying to regain territory to help them out, and then Onada is there with his crew, right? And they are obviously outnumbered, outmatched by the military, by the U.S. Army. And he goes into guerrilla warfare. So he's like he's in the jungle. His men are surviving through, and the war ends. And so they're like, okay, Onada, everything's done. You can go back home. The war has concluded. And they send out flyers through the through the air and airplanes, all that kind of stuff. And he's like, I don't believe you. I don't believe it. So they send out multiple things over and over again. And he still does not believe that the war has ended. Like, there's no way my country would ever give up. I'm going to keep fighting on. And eventually, somebody had to go from the Japanese government, bring him in, saying, hey, the war has really ended. We are now at this stage. And when he comes back, he sees a completely different nation than he left. You know, and Japan did change significantly after the war, and he's like, this is just not the country that I fought for. And what he realized was all of his suffering, all the 30 years that he spent in the jungle eating crickets, all that suffering was not worth it. Like, what did I give all this up for? You know, he thought he was gonna, he thought he was fighting for specific government, and then he comes back and it's completely different. So he ends up going to Brazil and just passes away there. But that was one of the examples. I thought it was really impactful because I was like, as you can tell, at the time he was going through it, he stayed in the jungle, eating crickets, all that kind of stuff, surviving. He actually said he was more happy there than when he came back to the more democratic Japan, because like, this is not what it was.
Yeah. And it's interesting because because he put the value there, right? Before he went onto the island, his command was you should never give up.
Yes.
At no expense should you give in and just fight to the death. And so that's what he took with him, and he went in there, and that's what he did till the very end, until he had to be he wasn't dragged away. Some other loopy guy came in and found him by screaming through the fields, right? Like, oh nada, and after 4 days he found him.
Yeah.
So then when he comes back, what's interesting is, if you're looking from the outside, because this whole thing is how you value suffering, the society, the newly set up Japan would look at this and say, man, you suffered for the 5 years I think he was on the island by himself. You suffered this whole time, and now you're back. You should be really happy. They glorified him as this hero.
Yep.
He didn't see it that way, right? He thought it was worse to be in society than to be in the jungle. So it's very interesting that, our perspectives are very different, what we see. And then that also helps you to think, like, I just need to figure out how to place the right value so that my suffering can be either minimized or otherwise it would be magnified.
So chapter 5 is you are always choosing. And one of the examples he gives in the book is around Malala. And you guys, and everyone knows the infamous Malala that was shot in the face, right? And she was shot in the face by the Taliban because she was trying to seek education. She's trying to seek to better her life. And obviously at that time, they were not about that, right?
She stood up for what she believed in.
Yeah. And so where does this tie into this is that she could have chose to just sit at home and say, you know what, this is not a war. I'm simply a little girl. This is not worth the fight. She could have chose to stay at home, but she chose to fight back. She chose to have other girls have the education. She chose to speak up against the Taliban, even though her life was threatened so many times. And again, you are always
even
choosing.
after she was shot in the face, she could have chose to say, like, hey, I could have died and I'm not going to do this anymore because they're going to continually be after me. But what happened after she was shot was she gained even more respect and more attention for all of this. And she used that to kind of fuel her and continue with her message even after that. She ended up winning Nobel Prize and all of these great accolades because she never backed down. She made the choice that she fully believed in.
Yeah, and it really resonates with me because in life you can choose how you react to certain things, right? Things can go your way, things that are out of your control. Sometimes you are also responsible for too. Like, so Mark kind of mentioned in the book, you might wake up one day in front of your doorstep, there is a baby, and somebody left a baby in front of your house, and you could just say, not my responsibility, and walk away. But no, you are given the responsibility, so you have to choose to accept it and continue to live on and help the baby. The same thing again, you choose how you react to things in your life, things that may or may not go your way. You can sit there and sulk, or you can say, this is a part of it, let me move on, or let me make it better. Right? So I think he does a good job of tying those two together.
Okay, so the next part in this book is, he says, you're wrong about everything. You're just wrong. Tapas, you're wrong. I like this because it puts a lot of things into perspective, and he calls out that, like, hey, the world is ever changing, ever evolving. What was true today may not hold true tomorrow. Things like trends change and technology changes. Like, it's never just right or wrong. There's always a different interpretation, and there's always a change, and we just have to be okay with that, because people spend so much time trying to prove that they are right at something that they never actually even live it or put actions into place.
Yeah.
So it's usually all about being right. But as soon as we can recognize that, hey, there could be another answer to this, or there could be another way to look at this, it opens up so many more doors and opportunities to do things like build relationships and create a community or a trusting relationship where people are actually debating through and talking through and learning from this versus having someone just be closed off and saying, hey, this is the right way, the only answer. And then you, in the book, he says, cause misery for everyone around
Right.
you.
And I know, I like what he says in the book as well, is sometimes we look at being in the wrong as failures, right?
Yeah.
And obviously we don't want to be failures.
And
then
that's why
also,
we're so like, no, I'm not wrong, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to be seen as a failure. You don't want to feel like a failure.
yeah, and you're going to die on that hill, right? You're going to say, I stand for this no matter what happens. And also sometimes being wrong can also make you seem uncertain about things, right? And people, again, nowadays with so much information happening and everywhere, you want to feel like you're always right. And it's okay for sometimes to say, you know what, I was wrong. That was wrong of me to say or of me to do.
Yeah.
But here's what I'll do differently.
I feel like this is a really hard one for a lot of people.
It's the ego aspect.
Yeah.
People who especially don't want to be wrong have that ego.
Yeah.
Right. Like I'm
And
so
then
and
is
so.
this where he goes into the avoidance law, the law of avoidance, where you, if it's something that you don't agree with or you don't like or you feel like it's trying to change you, you just like, I don't even want to deal
Avoid it.
with it, right? And
Yeah.
I've seen that people who are so adamant in what they think is true, and when you try to help them understand a different perspective, they're like, oh, I mean, not even to listen to you and just like not even be a part of the conversation. They don't want to hear anything else.
So how does somebody change that? How does
He goes through that in the book.
Right?
I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think there's a couple of points. You can ask questions, right?
Yeah.
There's 3 questions, I think he says.
What if I'm wrong?
Okay.
The first question you can ask yourself. What would it mean if I was wrong?
Okay.
And the last one is would being wrong create a better or worse problem than my current problem
Yeah.
for both myself and others?
Yeah.
So
I think that takes a lot of self-awareness, though.
Yeah.
Because you can't go through those 3 questions every time something comes up where you're about to be right or wrong. You know, it goes back to what we've read in some of the other books, that gap. When you get that stimulus, you're about to feel something and you have that gap and you say, okay, let me decide how I want to respond and react in this particular situation. And are you going to go in the route where you said, is it going to be harmful or is it going to be better for everyone in the situation? So I guess we just have to practice that and remember and ask questions. Just, you know, like Drake, be humble, sit down.
the next chapter is chapter 7. This is Failure is a Way Forward.
Fail forward. I love this one.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. I used to tell my team all the time, failure is only delayed success. You know,
that.
people always think like as soon as I know a couple of people in particular, as soon as they fail, oh my gosh, like it's the end of the world. They take it super personally. They can't move forward. Everything sucks. And it spirals downward and it wastes a lot of time. And then it also gets everyone else, you know, it affects everyone else because then it becomes kind of like a buzzkill. Like, dude, come on, like we're all in it together. Let's figure it out and just move forward.
Yeah.
But a lot of people get sucked into that and they can't get out. I like there's an example that he gave in here, this part of the book that I really like around Picasso, right? And the reason he brings up Picasso is because there's a part in this book where he says that all of your tiny mini failures in life is what adds up to this overall like big success that you have. And that's what happened with Picasso, right? He's years and years of learning and failing and figuring out his technique and all of that. And in the book, the example is he's sitting in a cafe, he doodles something and he's about to crumple up his doodle and throw it away. And this lady comes by and says, oh my gosh, can I have that? And he said, sure, you can buy it from me for like $20,000, something absurd. And she's like flabbergasted. She's like, that literally took you 2 minutes. And he's like, I'm sorry, no, that took me 20 years.
Yeah.
Right. And so he understood that everything that you are, every skill set that you have, everything that you are today is a accumulation of all the years of failures and success and everything that you've learned along the way. I thought that was really powerful because at least for me, I need to be reminded of that. It's every tiny failure is just an addition to your upcoming success.
It's all part of the process.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's part of the process in The Alchemist, right? We just did that last week. You can't just go from, from lead to gold. There's different steps along the way and everything needs its time and turn and you got to be patient to get there.
So chapter 8 is the importance of saying no. I like this chapter a lot just because and as you know, I love Stoicism. So Ryan Holiday always talks about this. Whatever you say yes to, you have to say no to, right? If you
Okay.
say yes to every single thing and you're accepting everything, you are swooping at every opportunity that comes your way, and just constantly just a yes person, you will overwhelm yourself. You're
Mhm.
gonna be super, I would say, discouraged. You're gonna feel inadequate as
Yeah.
well. So you have to also feel like, you know what, I just say no to things. It's
Yeah.
it's okay to say no and just move on.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna hang out with my friends at night because I gotta do this. Just say no and keep going.
But it's hard.
Yeah, it's hard.
So how do you do it? How do you just say no?
Going back to your values, right?
Okay.
What are you willing to suffer for?
Yeah.
So for me, it's, am I going to spend Friday night with my family watching a movie with my daughter and my wife? Is that important to me? Or going and getting drunk every single Friday with my buddies at a bar?
I laugh because I can't see you doing
Right,
that.
right.
It's an extreme example.
But that's part of it, right? So
Yeah.
I'm choosing to say no to my friends. And yes, that may or may not affect relationships, but at the same time, I'm
Yeah.
choosing what values to me.
If I can just call forward Stephen Covey right now and just kind of add a plug here, another thing that we can do to help with your values as well, right, is to pull up that time matrix table. And we have that as a resource on our Instagram page if you guys want to pop into there and see that. Or you can message us and we'll send you the PDF of it if it's helpful for you. And the time matrix is really plotting down all of your activities and saying, is this important? Should I do it? Is this, box 2 in that matrix is all about you and development and all of that. And that's where Covey says you should spend most of your time. And this made me think of that, is like when someone asks me to do something, I kind of take a mental note of like, hey, where does this fall in this table? Because if it's not a 2, I probably won't even entertain the thought. And if it's something like a 3 where it's somewhat urgent but not important, then here I'll hand it off to someone else and ask someone else to do it. But at least for me, like you said, sticking to your core values, but then also plotting it and making the time on that table will help.
Yeah. A lot of people will say yes to everything because they don't want to feel like they want to ruin relationships or ruin opportunities.
The yes man.
Yeah, the yes man for everything.
Yes.
Best of friends or even other opportunities will stick around if you know what your true values are.
I'm just like it's tying up together all of the books. I love this. So in The Alchemist, one of the obstacles of you getting your dream is love, right? And you just kind of said that. It's just like love gets in your way because you care more about other people. You don't want to hurt other people and you don't want to leave people behind. So you do what it is that you think you're supposed to do. And that in turn takes away from you and your journey and your path. You're settling.
The last chapter of the book, then you die.
And then you die. I'm going to leave this up to you. Show everyone your arm.
Oh, yeah. Right there. Memento Mori,
Memento
guys.
Mori.
Right there for the camera.
So he has this big tattoo along his arm. Yep. We got Miami together.
Yep.
So what's Memento Mori?
So celebrate life, but know death is on the way.
Yep. Remember death.
Remember death. So that's something that, he has a very personal story in the book towards the end with his friend passing away. And it really kind of helped change his entire perspective. It changed his entire mindset in how he did things, right? So like he was a womanizer. He didn't care about his career. He didn't care about college.
Womanizer.
Britney Spears.
Britney fan, you guys.
We're definitely millennials, guys. We're definitely millennials. So his friend passes away in a tragic accident, but he says something to him in a dream. What was that quote?
I love this part. So he's been depressed. His friend passed away. He's moping around. He's depressed. He doesn't know what to do. He sleeps. In his dream, his friend comes to him and says, "Why do you care that I'm dead when you're still so afraid to live?"
Yes.
And he says, "I woke up crying."
Yeah.
Wow, so powerful. That gave me chills. Like, so true.
It's so true.
So many of us are not living, and yet we mourn death without even appreciating our life.
Yeah, I mean, every single day, every single minute, we're getting closer to death. But yet we're waiting for that.
Yeah.
So
and then in the
whole
meantime,
time,
we
you're
give
not
F's
living.
about everything.
Yeah, you give F about everything else, and you're not living the life that you want, and you're not living according to your true values. So I think that the last chapter has a very serious tone to it versus the rest of the book. But I think it's important because he wants to hone that point in that, we will all die someday. But in that time frame, we have to make sure we are prioritizing how we're living and
Make
what
your
we do
life
in life.
worthwhile,
Yeah.
right? Like, and because we don't know when we're going to die. It's not like we
Yeah.
have an expiration date and we know exactly when. So then we have this exact amount of time to do whatever. It could be today, it could be tomorrow, it could be 20 years from now. We just don't know.
Yeah.
So what can you do in the meantime? Make the most of your time and remember you're going to die. Expect to die tomorrow. So I like this book because it does touch on very similar points that we've read in the previous books that we've shared about here on Eat, Read, Sleep. But Manson does a really great job putting it together in a fun way to read and a light way to read. And it's not so much instructional, like step-by-step instructions. It's really like, hey, these are the facts. Either you do it or you don't. You care or you don't. And it makes you almost like he's so indifferent about it that you want to like care even more about it. You're like, okay, this is really cool. And so much so that like I'm really excited because when we announced that we were reading this book this week, I actually had a handful of people reach out and say, oh, that looks like a book that's like totally my jam. I'm going to read with you guys this week. And we didn't necessarily get that same attention with some of the previous books we read. So I think that for many of you, if you have not joined us on our journey, this would be a really great book to start with because it's light, it's easy, and it's really relatable to everything that a lot of people go through. I love you mentioned a couple of times a lot of the stoicism that is in this book. And so it's kind of like blunt in certain ways, but then very philosophical in other ways. And he has a lot of great examples in here, celebrities and things like that that some people can connect to. So definitely a good read. It's a different type of read.
It is. It's very different.
All right, you guys. Well, it was quite a pleasure sitting on this orange couch with you, reading this orange book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F. And I guess I'm probably slightly orange
wearing orange
today
as well.
Too. That kind of works out. Thank you for joining Eat, Read, Sleep. If you enjoyed this, please support us by hitting the subscribe button, like this video so that we can use that to fuel and make more content for you guys. And join us next week. We're going to be kicking off another book by Simon Sinek, Start With Why. Enjoy your week. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.